All right, good Friday afternoon to you. I'm meteorologist Brian McClure. I hadn't posted a lot today because honestly, things have been wobbling back and forth. Models have been going back and forth, east, west. I really wanted to look and ingest more data. Now that I've had a lot of time to really let it all sink in, to me, this is looking more and more like it's just going to scrape right onto the east coast of Florida coastline. That's what it looks like to me. During the entire lifespan of Isaias, it's never really gotten its act together to be like an Irma or a Dorian or a Maria, any of those. But at the same time, it has fighting power. It just doesn't want to give up. So because of that, I think it's going to be in between the strong camp and the weak camp, and probably just kind of go maybe between a category 1, maybe even peaking at a 2 late tonight, and then go back down to a category 1. I could see that happening, and maybe weakening a little bit as it approaches Florida. Because of that, the problem with all this is you have a lot of variables that want to just cling on to, okay, if it's a strong storm, it gets pulled north. And if it's a weak storm, it just goes west. It's not really either. It's kind of in between. And so at times, you look at the satellite, which I'll show you here in a bit, and it looks really strong. And then at other times, you're like, that looks pitiful. So the center of circulation, I think, was actually gauged really well. You can see it right down here between the Turks, Caicos, and the southern Bahamas. It was gauged very well by most computer models. The Euro and the 12Z Euro and GFS did the best. The UK and Canadian, I thought, suffered in where they initialized. So they both have a good handle on where it is at. Assuming it keeps its heading northwestward like that, I think it's going to be really hard to miss Florida totally. Now, I'm not saying I'm still against this idea of like that path, but the more time goes along, I honestly think it's just going to continue on its northwest path and then slowly and gradually make its north turn like that. And because of that, I think there will officially be a Florida landfall. I could be wrong. Hey, I'm a meteorologist. It happens. Sticking my head out there, sticking my neck out there. But you look at the latest visible satellite, and it looks like, okay, all of a sudden, it's a little better, right? It looks more impressive all of a sudden. It is located right here. Okay, that's where the flare-up, that's where the center is located. Now, when Hurricane Hunter aircraft went there last, they found the center right about here. So that is a northwest movement. I mean, smack dab on a northwest movement. If this storm can strengthen to a high-end Cat 1 or a Cat 2 and continue to push off the dry air on the west side, I do think it still has a chance to miss Florida. I think it will tend to trend more north. If it stays wobbling back and forth, kind of waffling, as strong at times, then weak at times, I think it's just going to run into Florida. There is a lot of dry air on the western side. See all this dry air right in here? And so at some point in time, that's going to start to get infused into the storm, which is why you'll notice a lot of the computer models out there are not calling for this to strengthen that much. To tell you the truth, I think the peak intensity is going to be tonight. That's why I said borderline 1 or 2. I would not be surprised if Hurricane Hunter aircraft fly in it tonight and go, whoa, it's much stronger. And then tomorrow it starts to weaken again. Because it's one opportunity of warm, moist air is pretty much right now. The next 12 hours. This is it. After that, it runs into some wind shear, it runs into land interaction again. Cuba kind of cuts off some of its moist flow. To tell you the truth, this morning, by the way, it was really interesting to watch. When Hurricane Hunter aircraft flew in last night and they discovered, oh, strong enough winds, we'll declare it a hurricane, okay. And then all of a sudden, a lot of dry air kind of got infused into it right after that, coming off of the coast of Haiti and Dominican Republic, Hispaniola. Those are really tall mountainous regions. And so dry air comes rushing down off the mountains a lot of times. And so it kind of looked worse all of a sudden. Well, now what happened was it went past this little passage right here between Hispaniola and Cuba, and it has infused a lot of moist air around the center of circulation. So not a surprise. All of a sudden it looks a little stronger now. Well, guess what's going to happen as it moves northwestward? it's going to start to infuse a little bit of dry air off of Cuba, and also just naturally this air mass is a little bit drier out here. So that's why I said I wouldn't be surprised to see it just keep kind of doing this. It doesn't look like it's a Dorian and Irma Maria where it just all of a sudden just boom becomes a 4 or 5 and then it just stays that way. It's just not in that kind of environment. So there are positives and negatives that I'm talking about here. The negative is if you live in Florida on the East Coast from Miami, West Palm to Melbourne, Port Canaveral, those areas, I would almost kind of prepare like, yeah, there's going to be a high-end tropical storm or a Cat 1 hurricane by tomorrow night. I would just prepare like that. Now, the good news is most Florida homes and most businesses and most things down in Florida are kind of built for that anyway, so there isn't a whole lot of preparing to do. But if you're right on the coast, then there's going to be some storm surge almost no matter what. I mean, water levels almost kind of have to go up, even if it just barely misses to the east. Okay, all that being said, where the center is located right now, again, it's in a pretty good spot, and I think it will be over the next couple of days, I'd say over the next 12 to 14 hours. However, what you're looking at here is wind shear. Let me move this forward to tomorrow morning. And what you start to notice is it looks like the center's still pretty strong right here, but there's actually a pretty decent amount of wind shear working against it on the western side. And this also means there's going to be some dry air that gets infused in from the west-southwest. That's that graphic I was just showing you. That is that one. Okay, so again, you have all this dry air out in here. Eventually, it's going to get infused into the storm. So that's why I said I wouldn't be surprised if the strongest activity is tonight, into the morning, and then as it approaches Florida, you actually start to kind of see it come back down. Now, keep in mind, by that point in time, does it even matter? I mean, the differences between a high-end one, a low-end one, or a high-end tropical storm and a low-end category 1, they're really not that big of a difference. Either way, you can get strong wind, some surge on the coast, and obviously heavy rains. I'd say the biggest thing that this really comes down to is a fine line between who could potentially get really, really heavy rain on the eastern side and who doesn't hardly get anything on the western side. I would actually say that's a bigger thing right now. And this is, by the way, last night's to this morning's Euro ensemble. So I'm still waiting on the ensemble from the Euro for this afternoon, this evening. It's always delayed after the 12Z run comes out. But the reason I'm still going to show it to you is because even though things have shifted back a little west, what I want you to recognize in all this is, and I've been saying this all along, I'm actually kind of tired of saying it, and so you're probably tired of hearing it. If this storm strengthens, intensifies, it will take a more easterly path and stay off Florida. If it wobbles back and forth and continues to not really get its act together and just kind of says, well, I'm a tropical storm. Wait, I'm a category 1. Wait, I'm a tropical storm. And kind of does that. It's going to take more of a westerly path. And so what I want you to notice is the blue lines indicate a weaker tropical storm going through Florida. The green, yellow, and reddish, pinkish looking lines indicate a hurricane scraping to the east side. So you can't just look at this center line and go, oh, okay, so the Euro basically has it going right down the side of Florida. Well, it depends. It's intensifying this afternoon, so if it stays on that track or stays on that path of intensification, it might just barely miss Florida. But if it doesn't and it wobbles back and forth like I was kind of predicting and expecting, I think it might just run right into Florida. I think that's a very distinct possibility. Let me show you where the GFS initialized. This is the actual 12Z model run. It initialized perfectly, I think. Some people are picking on it, as always, but I don't know why. I think it did a good job. I think this is showing wind flow, so you can see it did a pretty good job with the center. This is also showing wind speeds, and you can see they are strongest on the eastern, north, and northwestern sides. Well, guess what? Hurricane Hunter aircraft just went in there and they said, where the strongest winds? Northeastern, north, and northwestern sides. Okay, I don't know how much better a model could possibly do. This is a computer model. It's doing a great job. So if you assume that, okay, it initialized well, so maybe it's onto something, the GFS takes this due northwest right at West Palm, and then at the last second, it kind of slows down, parallels the coast, and then looks like it makes landfall just north of West Palm, and then scrapes right along the coastline right there, and then off to the north. Okay, that's a distinct possibility. Let's come back to right now and go to the euro. I think the euro initialized really well also. Look, strong winds wrapping around on the northern side. There's very little wind around on the southwestern side right now, so these models I think are doing a good job. It takes a little slower approach, a little bit farther south, more like between Fort Lauderdale and West Palm, and it basically just runs it right into Florida. So there is no parsing of words with the euro. It basically just says, bloop, right into Florida. There it is. And then it takes it between Lake Okeechobee and West Palm, and then it turns north. In other words, it's the timing of when that northerly turn happens. I would say, even though, yes, that's a big difference on technicalities of where it makes landfall, believe it or not, I don't think that's that big of a difference in terms of wind speeds at the coast, storm surge at the coast. I think they're both going to be very similar no matter which path you choose and no matter which one of those models you kind of go with. What will be different, and this is what I mean for my Florida viewers. So for all of you that are watching around the country and other countries, and you're thinking, well, okay, if it's not that big a deal, the forecast is the forecast, right? Well, what it matters for is things like rainfall, okay? And to a certain extent, wind also. So let me show you windfall or rainfall first. If the euro is right, the heavier rains will come farther in over Florida, and you'll see potential for flooding rains on the east coast of Florida, and some of the heavy rain will even come all the way into Florida. Whereas, if the GFS is a little bit more accurate and it stays just a little to the east, even though that's not a big difference, look at what a big difference it makes in the rainfall. Now all of a sudden your heaviest rain is offshore. So you see my point? I mean, we're kind of splitting hairs here. I think the forecast is actually kind of honing in pretty good on where we think it's going. But these little nuances could make a difference in the weekend forecast for Floridian residents, Florida residents. Same thing with wind. Let me show you the wind swath. That's the GFS. Again, tiny little nuances. These are 40 and 50 mile per hour wind gusts in Florida. Okay, so I could see, yes, strong wind gust in Florida on the east coast. But notice where the strongest winds stay if the GFS is right, offshore. If the euro and its little western nudge is correct, which it might be, then all of a sudden you have stronger winds in Florida, 50 to 70 mile per hour gusts. And again, you can kind of see how the strongest winds come up and then it just weakens and falls apart right here in eastern Florida. And some of these gusty winds could even come all the way into central Florida. Not too bad. I mean, by Florida standards, it's not that big a deal. We get this with thunderstorms in the afternoon, but still, you get the point. It does make a difference. For example, especially Orlando sitting right in here and Polk County sitting right in here. There could be a difference between, hey, you have a gusty Saturday night into Sunday and you have a little bit of a breeze. Yeah, so there are differences. So those are the kind of things I'm looking at. And again, if you're just looking at it purely from a map standpoint, I generally think, based on what I'm seeing right now, and again, this could change, but generally what I'm seeing is it's going to move like this. And whether it comes technically ashore and makes landfall or not might not matter that much to some of the weather here from Melbourne, Port St. Lucie to West Palm, because in that area, I think whether it comes ashore or just barely stays offshore, you're going to get some storm surge on the coast, you're going to get some strong winds, you're going to get some heavy rain, and then it's more a matter of if it comes a little farther inland, then some of the heavier rain spreads farther inland and some of the wind spreads farther inland. That's really what it comes down to, but that kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at right now based on the latest data. All right, so I've gone long enough. Again, it's Friday afternoon. Have a great weekend. Obviously, because I am a Florida meteorologist, I have to work events no matter what, even though I'm normally off on the weekends. So I don't know how much I'll be able to post this weekend. Don't take it personal. That's just fact of life as a meteorologist. I have to go do my full-time job, and so I'll be working this weekend. Plus, I actually want to spend time with my kid, too. So, all right. So I can't guarantee how much I'll post, but I'll try to post when I can. All right. Have a good Friday. Have a good weekend.